And because he didn't see it moving in this direction, because he thought that, personally, he thought that most of the danger was over. None of the other people in the Bolshevik Party, at the top of the Bolshevik Party, thought that the danger was over, or anywhere close to being over. Right? So Lenin's like, look, danger's over, bourgeois are mostly suppressed, now we can start withering the state. Everyone else is like, no, we're encircled by enemies, they want to destroy us and they'll use any means to destroy us. What we need is to maintain the state to defend us. And so this political bitterness, right, is because ultimately a lot of his, the withering didn't happen. And it didn't happen because all of these other people who were, by my lights, good Leninists, including Trotsky, right, viewed the Soviet Union in real danger. And so I think that was their mistake. But this would account for the political bitterness. Does that make sense? The second thing is huge amounts of personal bitterness. Lenin was not initially a main figure in Russian communism or world communism. That was Plekhanov, who is the father of Marxism. And
Russian Marxism.
Russian Marxism. Obviously Marx being the head of Marxists. But he brought Marxism to Russia and eventually started taking an economist line. And Lenin, who was best friends with Plekhanov and Martov and all of these Russian revolutionaries, was forced to make a radical break with them and publicly, politically attack them in every sort of way. Right? Because even though they were his friends, he viewed them as taking a wrong political line. So he basically alienated most of his teachers, most of the people that he knew and he liked and loved and cared and worked with. And then also, he was a revolutionary, as was Karl Piłsudski, who again inherited the text from Engels, I believe. It went Marx, Engels, and then it was either Bernstein or Piłsudski, or it was just Piłsudski. Right? And this is the main guy of Marxism at the time. The head. Right? Every Marxist thinks of Karl Piłsudski at this time as the bastion and light of Marxism. And Lenin, because he's taking a radically different stance and is fighting for Marxism in Russia, has to write, again, against the head. It'd be like having to write how sucky a basketball player Michael Jordan is. Right? But this guy who has supported and propped up the international communist movement, Lenin has to write the work, right? Marxism and the renegade Karl Piłsudski. And viciously, but accurately and polemically attack all of the people who have been the lights and bastion of Marxism through all of these dark times. And so, right, so one is about a theoretical political matter, but another is just the theoretical and political actions Lenin had to take to ensure the success of the Bolshevik Revolution. Does that also make sense? So.
Is it widely agreed that Marxist-Leninism would lead to Stalinism? Because it sounds like, I mean, I know, like, I hear that and I immediately have a problem with it, but I know others might not. But so I would like to know, is that would be debatable, right?
That's right.
Well, yeah, I mean, Greg has his own views on that, but I mean, if you situate the Soviet Union historically in its material conditions, right, where you have the West constantly aggressing and aggravating it, and basically there's never an opportunity to actually dissolve the state. I mean, it's arguable maybe after World War II, right? That's where most good Marxist-Leninists say, look, Stalin should have done it after that. But I mean, again, when you have Europe going to shit during World War II, and Hitler basically starting to eat up nations and expand, it's pretty good to have a state around that can actually organize the Red Army to actually combat fascism, right? If you want to know who, oftentimes people are like, oh yeah, D-Day was really awesome because they got in and they stopped Nazis and fascism. No, it's the Battle of Stalingrad, the Battle of Kursk. And it's through these key battles that Hitler's armory and army was completely destroyed. And beyond that, they didn't have an air force or naval reserves. And so, yeah, I'm going to give Stalin props on stopping Hitler. And so... Okay, but... So the point being is there was never really an opportunity. As long as, basically, it was its own socialist state and for its own time period. And there was really never any allies for them. They basically had to do it on their own. And what they really wanted to do was simply build socialism in their own country. They didn't really want to try to expand. It was just... Well, I guess, I mean, to clarify, just one of you made the statement that Marxist-Leninism, like, sort of inevitably leads to Stalinism. And I would assume that a lot of Marxist-Leninists would have a problem with that statement. Do you want to... That's what I would mean.
Yeah. I'll be clear. I'm an anti-revisionist. This is my position, right? So I'm an anti-revisionist. Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, math. Well, or Hwachek, if you're one of those. But in any case, but Trotskyists view themselves as Marxist-Leninists and also are anti-Stalinists. And then there's also non-defined Marxist-Leninists who generally don't support Stalin. But yeah, so there is a clarification. There's debate on whether or not Stalin was a good Marxist-Leninist.
Okay.
The Trotskyists especially disagree.
But, okay, but thank you for that.
Does that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the point to be is, look, if there's going to be a state, right, which is a dictatorship, but it's a dictatorship of the proletariat, and what that dictatorship does is it serves as in a time of emergency to basically, essentially what I want to say is this: there's no off switch to capitalism. There has to be a transition state. You can't just say state off, capital off, and voila, we're done. There needs to be a transition period. And so that's what the dictatorship of the proletariat is.
Well, but the transition didn't need to be Stalinist. Okay, I can see your face. I would disagree. Sorry, we can move on.
That's fine. I would recommend there's actually a lecture on the YouTube. There's a lecture on the YouTube channel on Stalinism if you want to learn more. But, Rob?
Leninism, from previous lectures I've gathered, has a very hardline, militant sort of nature, where it says any enemies outside, any enemies inside, we purge and we get rid of, and we do what we need to get rid of and defend ourselves and make sure we survive. And with that being a part of what I've gathered, is that an actual fundamental part of Leninist views?
I can speak from what is to be done. A lot of times what Lenin will say is, look, you have a lot of times, he goes over this as the freedom of criticism, right? It's pretty much the very first part. And he says, look, if you guys have criticisms of the party and the directions we're going, they should be constructive criticisms. They shouldn't just be trying to slander the party and devolve into trade union politics. Or basically, and he makes this big point. He's like, look, he has this famous, like, oh, we are traveling in a marsh, we're holding hands. But there's people trying to drag us into the marsh, and we're trying to fight against that. So you're free to criticize, but also you should be free to let go of us and not drag us down with you. But as far as political purges, do you want?
Well, I mean,
I'm referring more to the violent purges and the executions, the things that people view more as the Stalinist, more as the problematic things.
Well, do you want to do the terror of 1919, or?
This is an incredibly problematic position. This is my position, but it should be clear, where plenty of Marxist-Leninists disagree with me. Lenin advocates for purges of the party. It doesn't necessarily entail purges in a violent fashion, theoretically, right? It's possible, theoretically, to purge the party without that ending up in violent purges. So that would be the traditional as in from 1960 on Leninist response.
Okay, so otherwise the Leninists from 1960 on are mostly going to say, well, we still believe that we should do purges, we just don't believe that we should do them in a violent, mass-murdering sort of way.
Yeah, well, I mean, Leninists at the time also would say that. But I think if we're honest, because of the experience of Leninism, we can recognize if you're willing to purge from the party, which I believe is necessary, then it not inevitably, but as a matter of fact, seems to lead to violent purges. That's what? Well, the reason why is if you're building a political project of any variety and people are trying to destroy it, you either have to abandon that political project or defend it. Now, if you're trying to, so again, conceptually there's no problem, right? Because if you're trying to build a political party, by purging people, you can just remove them quite gently from the party. However, if people are using force to destroy that political project, you're once again confronted with an option. Abandon the political project or take the means necessary to defend it. At no point do I think communism will ever instantate under capitalism in which capitalism is not violently trying to destroy it. And Leninism is not willing to abandon the political project of communism. So its ability to purge, right, becomes the ability to meet like with like. Does that make sense?
Kind of, but when we're saying attack with force, that's something that really has to be defined to me. With a lot of what happened in the era of Stalin, what seemed to be the case was individuals who were a member of the army under Trotsky